Preface. Sometimes he looked around him, horrified by the weight of it all, the career of paper. He sits in the data spew of hundreds of lives. There's no end in sight. Let's call a meeting to analyze the blur. Let's devote our lives to understanding this moment, separating the elements of each crowded second. We will build theories that gleam like jade idols, intriguing systems of assumption. We will follow the bullet trajectories backwards to the lives that occupy the shadows, actual men. There is much here, in the aberration in the heartland of the real. Don DeLillo, Libra, 1988. On April 19, 1995 at 9:02 a.m., a truck bomb exploded in front of the Murrah Federal Building in downtown Oklahoma City, killing 168 people, including 19 children. 2 days later, authorities named 27-year-old Timothy McVeigh as the prime suspect in, quote, the most deadly attack on American soil. Thereafter, his visage, quickly dubbed the Face of Terror, inundated the media, thus becoming seared into the archives of public memory. In the immediate hours, weeks, and months after the explosion, a number of rapidly formed and highly conflicting narratives about both the bombing and bomber appeared and spread. The stories developed over time and continue to circulate today. Their construction involves a complex and dynamic process of collaboration and competition between multiple individuals and institutions with various motives, agendas, and intents, stated or implied, all of whom assert different facts based on different evaluative criteria. Authors of the stories include journalists, victims and survivors, eyewitnesses, the FBI, federal prosecutors, politicians, experts, analysts, pundits, defense attorneys, and notably McVeigh himself. Within each narrative, the material, facts, and chronology of events, as well as the roles and identities of the villains differ, as do the acts attributed to them and their purported motives. Today, Timothy McVeigh, an American terrorist, all-American monster, and for a time, the most hated man in America, continues to personify a wide range of prototypical Cold War and post-Cold War identities. A self-styled Rambo, survivalist, militia type, gun nut, lone nut, disgruntled soldier, rogue avenger, boy next door gone bad, and quintessential conspiracy theorist turned rabid homegrown lone wolf domestic terrorist. In McVeigh's Face of Terror is also reflected the ghost of Lee Harvey Oswald, and like Oswald, John Wilkes Booth, Sirhan, and a number of other American lone gunmen before and after McVeigh, all of whom inspired multiple competing, highly conflicting, and continually evolving narratives and debates about just how alone these lone wolves really were. Many of the narratives that appeared after McVeigh's arrest claim to tell the real, and sometimes suppressed, story of the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing. All of these stories were and continue to be told publicly by diverse groups and subcultures within multiple genres, fictional, historical, biographical, academic, and journalistic, and are transmitted through many media, printed, digital, televised, and cinematic. Various readers and commentators have labeled these narratives alternately as fantastical fictional or accurate historical accounts, the stuff of conspiracy theories, cautionary tales, or dangerous ideological expressions of belief, or radically cynical disbelief. McVeigh remains central within all such stories, yet appears very different depending on the version told. He may appear as one of several unnamed accomplices, a witting or unwitting patsy steeped in a world of shadows, spies, cross-dressing neo-Nazis, and doppelganger decoys, a modern-day Manchurian candidate, victim of nightmarish schemes and inhumane experiments hatched by faceless conspirators, or some combination thereof. Recurring elements in the plots of these stories include black helicopters, mysterious clandestine black operators, mad scientists, brainwashing, implanted tracking and mind control biotechnologies, faked executions, and from time to time UFOs. Although easily dismissed as fantastical paranoid tales, the mere existence of these narratives raises questions about and poses radical disruptions to historical and current medical, psychological, bioethical, and terrorism discourses. These stories act as causes and solutions to physical and psychological terror, many products of a covert sphere, knowledge of which may help to distinguish between the signified and the signifier, symbols of representation and that which is represented, fact and fantasy, reality and illusion. The acceptance of one version over another depends upon pre-existing beliefs about what is logical, plausible, implausible, palatable, or simply unimaginable. This work differs from previous treatments for a number of reasons. To begin with, it identifies and compares commonly told stories about McVeigh and the bombing, stories that more often than not rely upon recycled sources and focus exclusively on the bombing while providing only a cursory glance at McVeigh himself. This book tests all existing stories against a wealth of newly introduced biographical information gained through personal interviews and archival collections, rendering the majority of previous depictions overly simplistic, deterministic, and factually dubious or devoid of context. When these stories are compared and new information introduced, a very different picture of Generation X's own American terrorist is revealed. Secondly, this book differs from its predecessors by demonstrating how Timothy McVeigh himself told not only the most commonly known and officially sanctioned version, the lone wolf story, but, before and after his arrest, privately told versions of all the competing stories that would come to circulate. Finally, the Oklahoma City bombing is continuously invoked to understand other violent acts, and McVeigh is a primary figure to compare the lives, motives, and actions of those who commit them, a circumstance necessitating a more complete understanding of both McVeigh and the bombing, a gap I hope this book hopes to fill. Method and approach. After surveying the majority of publicly available literature about the bombing and McVeigh, I began locating, interviewing, and corresponding with the victims' family members, survivors, witnesses, attorneys, private investigators, journalists, McVeigh's co-workers, friends, neighbors, and underworld associates, including bank robbers, neo-Nazis, militia leaders, and many others. I found these individuals in, among other places, Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Kansas, Arizona, Nevada, Utah, and New York. Simultaneously, I sought out and obtained hard-to-find documents relating to the case, many that are publicly introduced within this book for the first time. Newly introduced oral and archival sources include, but are not limited to, materials found within the Stephen Jones collection located at the University of Texas, Austin, and the American Terrorist Collection located at St. Bonaventure University. After Timothy McVeigh's sentencing in 1997, and at McVeigh's request, his lead attorney, Stephen Jones, was removed from his team of lawyers. In 1998, Jones published his account of the case, Others Unknown, and donated the mountains of material generated by the defense team to the Dolph Briscoe Center for American History at the University of Texas, Austin. The Jones collection includes, but is not limited to, internal defense team memorandum, meeting notes, investigatory reports, interviews with McVeigh's friends, family, co-workers, and outsiders, personal letters written by and to McVeigh, reports filed by defense team mental health and other experts, courtroom exhibits, audio tapes and transcripts of conversations with McVeigh, witnesses, journalists, and others, FBI investigatory documents, called 302s and inserts, investigatory documents from other law enforcement and intelligence agencies, defense-generated legal briefs, filings and correspondences, newspaper clippings, and McVeigh's military and medical records. To date, I am the only researcher to have gone through the entire publicly available portion of the collection, an endeavor that took 4 years. In addition, during the summer of 2012, I reviewed and transcribed the entire American Terrorist collection located at St. Bonaventure University, consisting of hundreds of letters written by McVeigh to his biographers after his conviction until the time of his execution, as well as transcripts of hundreds of hours of their interviews with them. The American Terrorist collection picks up where the Jones collection leaves off. The archival and oral sources introduced in this book contribute a wealth of contextual detail and information that aids in a closer comparative analysis of existing texts. The data presented operates on a number of levels relevant to several sociocultural and political arenas, and aggressively intercedes in debates about the factual details of McVeigh's life and the bombing. Some of the documents found in the Jones collection, including FBI investigatory documents and McVeigh's medical records, have also been obtained through my own FOIA requests. Additionally, other individuals, including Salt Lake City attorney Jesse Trentadue and Peter Langen, have generously provided duplicate versions of documents found in the Jones collection, as well as other investigatory documents not found there. I used these sources to show how Timothy McVeigh authored all the competing stories about himself, not only those of the lone wolf variety. From these, as well as publicly available sources, I constructed a multi-source timeline of McVeigh's life and critical moments leading up to the bombing. The use of this timeline helped me to identify when sources contradicted with each other. While certain details are repeated throughout this book, each time they appear within a new context and in relation to previously unknown details, in a way that, with each progressive telling, requires a new interpretation of those details and the alternate conflicting details discussed. Each story variation examined, as told by McVeigh and others, holds strikingly different implications about the nature of authority, reality, truth, control of the narrative, and the potential consequences of labeling certain ideas and identities as threatening, harmful, dangerous, and even unthinkable. Compared against each other and to newer information introduced in this book, these stories illustrate the shifting nature of history itself and the ways that the Oklahoma City bombing acts as an example of how institutional secrecy can subjugate and silence information and knowledge and relegate it to the outskirts of officially sanctioned regimes of truth.